All right, let's dive into a theory that really blurs the lines between ancient texts, religious belief, and, well, science fiction. We're going to explore a really fascinating and, yeah, highly controversial way of reading one of the most influential books in the entire world.
So let's just get right to it with the big question. It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it? What if you take the Bible, strip away thousands of years of theological interpretation, and just read it like a history book? According to one translator, what you find isn't a spiritual guide, but a record of humanity's run-in with extraterrestrials.
And the person making this claim is a man named Mauro Biglino. Now this is where the story gets really interesting. He wasn't some fringe writer from the get-go. Biglino actually spent years as a translator, working with the original Hebrew Masoretic Text for Edizioni San Paolo. That's a major Catholic publishing house. And that background, that deep dive into the original language, is what he leans on for his whole argument.
So how in the world does he get from the Old Testament to ancient astronauts? Well, his method is actually pretty simple on the surface. He pushes for what he calls a strictly literal reading. So imagine taking the ancient Hebrew text and just translating it word for word, like you would a car manual, without any of the spiritual or metaphorical stuff that's been layered on top for centuries. The whole point is to find what he believes is the plain meaning hiding underneath it all.
And as you can probably guess, this method leads to a pretty radical reimagining of the Bible's main characters. Let's see exactly how he builds this case.
Okay, this whole debate really comes down to one critical Hebrew word, Elohim. Now, traditionally, you're told this word means God, and the fact that it's a plural word that's explained away as a plural of majesty. You know, like when a king says we when he just means himself. But Biglino, he completely rejects that. He says, nope, plural means plural. End of story. So for him, Elohim isn't God. It's a group of powerful, physical, technologically advanced beings.
And according to his reading, these Elohim weren't divine in any way we'd recognize. I mean, they had physical bodies, they ate, they walked, they drank, they didn't perform miracles, they used advanced tech. They didn't create humanity out of some divine love, they genetically engineered us. And they weren't all on the same team either. He claims they were split into factions, fighting over territory, and maybe the biggest claim of all, they never once talked about a soul, or heaven, or an afterlife.
So where's the proof, right? Where in the Bible does he actually find evidence for these extraordinary claims? Well, Biglino points to several key passages that he believes have been totally misunderstood for centuries.
Let's start with one of the most famous lines in Genesis. The traditional translation goes, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image.'" Now really pay attention to those words, us and our.
To Biglino, this isn't some king speaking majestically. No way. He argues it's exactly what it sounds like, a group discussion. The us and our are literal. He's suggesting that multiple beings, the Elohim, are all collaborating on a project, the creation or maybe the genetic modification of humankind.
But, and this is a big but, mainstream scholarship has some very well-established answers for this. First, as we mentioned, is the plural of majesty. The second popular theory is that God is talking to his heavenly court, to the angels. And here's the kicker. The very next verse, Genesis 1:27, switches right back to the singular. So God created man in his own image. For most scholars, that kind of settles it. Biglino claims that was a later edit to push monotheism, but that's a tough case to prove.
Let's move on to another key piece of evidence. And this one is a cornerstone for pretty much all ancient astronaut theories. I'm talking about the super weird, really complex vision described by the prophet Ezekiel.
Biglino looks at this vision, and he doesn't see a spiritual metaphor. He sees a technical description. That so-called chariot, he says it's a complex flying machine. The famous wheels within wheels? Not a symbol for God being everywhere at once, but a literal description of an advanced landing gear that can move in any direction. The angelic living creatures? Those are just the pilots. He even interprets the pavement of sapphire stone from a similar vision as a physical landing platform.
Of course, the traditional view couldn't be more different. For theologians, Ezekiel's vision is this incredible masterpiece of symbolic writing. It's a powerful, poetic attempt to describe something that is, by its nature, indescribable, the glory and power of God. It's not a blueprint for a spaceship, it's an expression of awe.
And this really gets us to the heart of the conflict, doesn't it? The debate isn't just about how you translate a few words. It's a fundamental disagreement over how to even read an ancient text and what meaning really is.
Mainstream academics have several major problems with Biglino's approach. First, they say he completely ignores literary context. The Bible is packed with poetry, metaphors, and symbolism. They also accuse him of confirmation bias, Just cherry-picking the verses that seem to support his theory while ignoring all the ones that don't. A big one is that his work hasn't gone through the rigorous academic peer review process. And maybe most importantly, they charge him with anachronism, basically imposing modern ideas like genetic engineering onto an ancient text from a world that just didn't have those concepts.
So, beyond all the back-and-forth arguments, why has this theory caught on with so many people? What are the bigger stakes here?
I mean, this isn't just a small academic debate. It presents two totally different ways of seeing the world. In one, creation is a profound spiritual act. In the other, it's a biological experiment. Miracles become technology, and our place in the universe completely shifts from being created in God's spiritual image to being a modified species made in the physical image of our alien creators.
It's also really important to understand that Biglino isn't just working in a vacuum here. His ideas fit right into a much larger cultural trend, the ancient astronaut theory, that has fascinated people for decades, suggesting that aliens are the missing key to understanding our own history.
You can actually see a clear evolution here. Back in 1968, you had Eric von Daniken using things like pyramids and ancient art as his evidence. Then in 1976, Zecharia Sitchin did something very similar to Biglino, but he focused on Sumerian texts, introducing the world to the Anunnaki. Biglino's unique contribution is taking that same lens and focusing it intensely, almost exclusively, on the Hebrew Bible, using his background as a translator to give it a specific kind of credibility.
So when you're faced with such a radical idea, the path forward isn't really blind belief or just outright dismissing it. It's about critical thinking, looking at the claims, weighing the evidence, and really trying to understand the strong counterarguments from the experts in these fields.
And that leaves us with this one final massive question. What are these ancient texts really? Are they a record of humanity's brush with the divine, filled with deep spiritual truth and metaphor? Or are they a faded, misunderstood history book, telling the story of our cosmic origins, just waiting for someone to come along and retranslate them literally? Because depending on how you answer that, everything changes.